Since Uhuru Kenyatta has received 6,173,433, he has received more than 50.07%. I therefore declare Uhuru Kenyatta the duly elected President of the Republic of Kenya.
Surrounded by the elite presidential team, the President-elect of the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, circled there and ringed under very heavy security. You can barely make him out in the crowd. Very jubilant. The winning team as far as these elections are concerned.
The Honorable Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta.
My fellow Kenyans, I want to thank you. Thank you all for your patience and support along this long way that we have walked together. Asante sana. I thank God for sustaining us and for bringing us this far.
Our victory today, ladies and gentlemen, is in all manner of definition a miracle.
Sherehe ya wanajubilii ilitanda na kusikika kote nchini, huku katika ngome za ODM kimya kikitanda. Huku sherehe zikizidi kunoga, uamuzi wa mwenyekiti wa tume huru ya IEBC Isaac Hassan ya kumtangaza Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta kama rais ilipata pigo la kwanza.
Democracy is on trial. Democracy on trial in Kenya. I want to begin by thanking the Kenyan people for exercising their democratic right on the 4th of this month to turn out overwhelmingly to vote in the last elections. I also want to thank particularly those Kenyans who voted for me and my running mate in these elections. If those who voted against me exercise their democratic right. This is not the IEBC that Kenyans and Judge Krigler envisioned. This crisis is not just about the IEBC. It's a crisis in the very workings of the faith that Kenyans have placed in their institutions to respect their democratic rights and the rule of law. It is democracy that is on trial. We will uphold the rule of law and we will abide by its decisions. We will therefore shortly move to court to challenge the outcome that the IEBC announced a few hours ago.
Kwa ufupi, Kenya ilijipata katika njia panda sawia na taifa la Ghana, mahala ambapo kesi dhidi ya urais iliwasilishwa mahakamani. Katika mawasiliano ya hapo awali baina ya mshirika wa karibu wa Raila Odinga, uamuzi wa kwenda mahakamani huenda ulitokana na ushawishi wa afisa mkuu wa IEBC James Oswago.
Koro hape nyindo kikuongrinwa.
Moja ngendi masiya jaroti wani yo ya ya. Iyo kwa ndiro ro yudi jikon, wewe ndio wao jikon. Oh, dina ngi John, dina wait for the tomorrow. Ya ro, pero que vos go ni como can access it, so you don't need it. So keep it. For me, what you mean is what I just see me ko pe cielo me ko pare. Quando che make sure ni non ando ko opla le ko. But mane boy ro ko. Mano mio ko jero ko. Pero no mo.
To awacho ni gik mamit malichi. Koro wacho ge wacho gine ikuongrinwa tiketo koki koro ber.
No. I can't. How can I do that?
Kaida kuira kadaka mboroma ini magibath wangadi ma bath Zambia. Kada South Africa, Pen Africa, Pin Cape Town. Warangu ni manakata gine moro klore moko yo Shelly Point, Pinye, Pen Africa, Pin Cape Point.
That group on the Goro.
Yeah. Okinya kungri.
No. By the way, we can compel somebody to be watching tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to be dodo. Yeah, you can be compelled. Tell local report Guinea. Namunga Guinea. I think it's the other one.
Koro wanya ketu ngatu moro anda oath. O jaduma chairman. Do wach gika. Gikmengiza ka.
Anda oath. Ini Somali kose. Ini bwana ni kamaja lemo kabisa. Mucha pena ya que ninguém no quería morir por algo. De consequence no moríamos.
De ango?
Consequence no querían beco. Yo como aquí consequence ya lo haría variado. Yo como podríamos cabeza. Dan digo que iba a andar ahí. Kita kau ada dulu batin. Mungkin ini kedua kejuan tu tadi kena bicara kita. Kita kau jalan lah. Kita mau ke berhenti kalau mau ke dia. Pero ni kalau kada korban kinyo era kiari ya lebih beda patakali.
James Oswago anadai kuwa kufukuzwa kwa maajenti wote katika ukumbi wa Bomas kutawapa mwanya ya kesi yao kusikizwa, kwani ilikuwa kinyume kufanya hivyo. Mwanya ambao umekuwa vinywani mwa wanasiasa pinzani hadi wa leo.
the process was subverted. And for me, having been there and being thrown out, and at that time I was a cabinet minister, let alone being an election agent for Raila was prime minister at the time. To be thrown out in those circumstances with men dressed in military gear, because all the formations were there, National Youth, GSU, regular police, and if you look in the bushes around Bomas, there were extra, personnel, military and other security personnel in the wait.
Agents were not thrown out of the tallying center. They were relocated to another office. We gave them a boardroom. The plan was this, Alan. The plan was that they will sit here and they will watch our officers do the tallying. And then they'll be given a copy each of the results before the staff bring it to the... Remember, the commissioners were in a lounge. If you know the layout of Bomas, we're in a lounge behind the auditorium, while the secretariat was in the main tallying center. And they were into groups, 10 groups. So they were each scrutinizing the results and doing their correcting before they bring to the commissioners. So before they bring it to the commissioners, my instruction was that we give it to them and they keep it for half an hour. They go through it. If there's any objection, the chief agents was to bring it to my attention. So what they did is that they said, no, we must also countersign the forms. They created a space for themselves, not known to law, where they started now signing as agents, as chief agents, saying, okay, now we approve the result. They basically were saying, you cannot announce anything until we approve the results ourselves. And that's not the way it works. The commission does the job. You take the results. If you're unhappy, there's a procedure for challenging the results. You first raise with the returning officer. If you're unhappy with it, you go to a petition. So for a whole day, we could only announce 4 results. A whole day, 12 hours, only 4 results were announced. The other problem is that apart from the chief agents, members of parliament and senators and governors who are elected, or some who lost the elections, came from all over the country to Bomas and started wearing observer badges. And they packed the tallying center. And the staff were overwhelmed. We found staff completely paralyzed and not able to move or work. So as a commission, we sat and we sought for legal opinion. We asked our lawyers to research the law and tell us what we can do. And they were very clear in their opinion.
Ushawishi huu huenda ndio uliowafanya wana CORD kuwa na imani na mahakama kuu na kuamua kulizamia mzima. Katika uchaguzi huo tata, IEBC ilikuwa imewaficha Wakenya kuhusiana na rejista nyingine ambayo ilitumika pasi na Wakenya kujuzwa.
When you do voter registration and you finish the exercise, you close it. The law requires that you publish a provisional register and send it to all the regions where people have registered for them to check their names and confirm whether they've been captured. We also give an SMS code where you could SMS your ID number and you get a feedback, either you are registered or not, or you are in the right polling station. And so that process produced a result. Some people found themselves not in the list. Huge numbers of them were found not to be in the list. Some of them found their names taken to different polling stations. And so after we did that correction now, with the support of and remember, time was very short. It was December 18th to January and February. And the election is 4th of March. So we're talking a very short time. But we used the officers on the ground to verify and confirm no voter who has been registered is left out. So what is in the provisional register may not reflect the actual register, because we had to then go back on our data and confirm those who have been left out and are put back on the register. And we also discovered that there were some people who had gone to register and they were registered, they were given voting slips, but somehow their data was not captured or it was lost during the data transfer. You know, when you are registered as a voter in Kilimani Primary School and the officer is keying in the data, he takes the flash disk, he brings it to Nairobi region. It's then fed into a master computer, preparing the. So that movement of data from Marsabit, from Kisumu, from all over, sometimes some data were lost. So we discovered we had lost 36,000 people's biometrics. And so we prepared their names in a special register and sent all their names to all the polling stations and said, these people, when they come, they are genuine voters. They should be allowed to vote. Yeah.
It is not idle complaint. They have further produced a so-called special register which has more than 32,000 voters.
Problem with the Green Book, well, there were several problems with the Green Book. One is that the public didn't know about it until the court case. Everybody had been told that it would be an electronic register compiled through the BVR kits, etc., and that you know, your name and your information would be stored on a server, and that's the principal legal verifiable register. So when the Green Book came up, it was sort of like, where did this come from?
Chama cha CORD hatimaye kiliwasilisha kesi hiyo mahakamani dhidi ya mwenyekiti wa IEBC Isaac Hassan, Uhuru Kenyatta na naibu wake William Ruto. Hii ni nakala ya kesi iliyowasilishwa mahakamani ambayo wana CORD walidai kuwa IEBC iliwaandikisha Wakenya pasi na kuzingatia utaratibu unaofaa, kando na wao kutotekeleza uchaguzi huru na wa haki pale mashine hizo zilipofeli. Walichosahau kuwasilisha ni ile alama ya 51 ya kutoa uongozi wa urais.
I think if they had had some of us, it could have been winnable. Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Because of basics. Any good lawyer will tell you, do not present a case that will actually even raise reputational. Your reputational will put into question your reputation. So my advice would have been, don't file, and in that way we could have won as CORD then, yeah. Because honestly, looking at that petition, there was nothing in it. There was no petition. Yeah, there was no petition. There was no petition. Actually, I went through that document and asked my boss, there is no petition that I have seen, but I think I must be missing something. Yeah.
What did your boss say?
Really? Okay, just go back again and check. Yeah. Perhaps we thought we had been served with the wrong documents. Yeah. Going by the media hype, I'll actually call it the build-up to the grand petition that never was. Yeah. I think it was a mockery to the legal process. But again, it's really a constitutional right that parties must involve.
Katika chaguzi zote, Ghana ilionekana kuwa na demokrasia halisi, lakini mwaka wa 2012 Ghana ilijipata katika njia panda sawia na Kenya. Mashine zao za BVR zilikumbwa na hitilafu, lakini tofauti na Kenya, tume ya uchaguzi ya Ghana ilichukua uamuzi wa dharura kuleta utulivu na haki kwa wapiga kura. Vyama vya kisiasa navyo vilikaza njuga na kufuatilia kwa makini shughuli hiyo bila ya wasiwasi yoyote, kwani udhibiti wa wapiga kura ulikuwa mikononi mwao.
We use about 3 different computers to add up. If they all match, then we are sure that the addition is correct. If there's a variance, okay, maybe 2 say 100, but Dufan says 90, then there must be a mistake. Then we will have to go and do recollation.
Hata baada ya mahakama kuu ya Ghana, kesi hiyo iliendelea kwa miezi 9 mtawalia, kubaini mshindi wa uchaguzi wa urais.
This case was a test case for those of us in the legal profession, as well as students of law. And people make comparisons between our Ghanaian situation with the swift nature in which the Kenyan election petition was dispatched. The two are different. In our case, the rules governing the election petitions are such that you cannot use a short period of time, as it were, to adjudicate. For instance, the rules will say that the petitioner has 21 days within which to file his case. So already, you can't be talking about 2 weeks. Then, the rules also say that before the petitioner would even go to court, the petitioner would have to wait for the declaration of the results by the EC. And so, even if you are prepared as a petitioner and you are well armed with the evidence, you still have to bid your time for the elections to be declared before you go to court. So looking at all this, you can't use 2 weeks within which to dispose of the case.
The presiding judge, I think, tried to be smart. And I say so because other leading advocates have come out to say that, in fact, it was 5-4 for the petitioners. Because really, if you look at the issues that were set down for the trial, which was that whether there were irregularities and whether those irregularities affected the result, then our case was made out. Because there were 5 justices, and mind you, each of those grounds was enough to lead to a rerun, because the votes affected will affect the overall votes. So if you have 5 justices agreeing that one infringement or other has been made out, then our case had been made out.
Sawia na Ghana nchini Kenya, siku zilianza kuyoyoma huku jaji mkuu Willy Mutunga akijipata na kibarua kigumu ndani ya siku 14 mtawalia kutoa maamuzi ya busara na hekima.
Well, I knew after the petition was filed, because that's when he started looking at the papers, because the timeline was what, 14 days, and we had to start the moment the papers were fired. We start, reading them. We had our law clerks, our legal researchers. A lot of people don't know that there were about 50 lawyers involved in the whole process. And another thing that we did that maybe a lot of people don't know is that there was a furious training before the petitions came through. We were trained by Ugandan judges because they had a lot of experience in election petitions, particularly presidential elections. And also for the Supreme Court, we also had meetings with High Court judges and Court of Appeal judges who had petitions, because some of us were fairly new, like me. I hadn't had any petition. So there's a kind of schooling, that went into all this. It's the Ugandans actually who told us that because of the shortness of time, we might not be able to give a reasoned decision, but we could have a decision and give the reasons later so that we meet the constitutional threshold.
Huku uamuzi wa mahakama kuu ukisubiriwa kwa hamu na gamu, wakuu wa usalama wakiongozwa na Jenerali mkuu wa majeshi Julius Wawero Karangi, mkurugenzi wa NIS Michael Gishangi, Francis Kimemia na Inspekta Jenerali wa polisi walimtembelea Uhuru Kenyatta katika mojawapo ya shughuli zao za kawaida za kiusalama. Hatua hii ilionekana na baadhi ya Wakenya kama ishara ya kukubalika kwake kama kiongozi, pasi na kusubiri matokeo ya mahakama kuu.
I knew, the decision was made, that a signal was being sent to the Supreme Court that you dare not. I mean, there are some actions that speak louder than words. I think it was very inappropriate for them to have done that. But even at Bomas itself, you know, normally when you want to pronounce the results of an election, you call all the parties that we are now ready and prepared to pronounce the verdict. When the Electoral Commission was now ready to pronounce the results of the elections, they sent word to candidate Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy that we were now going to announce the results, and he was given time and opportunity to drive to Bomas to receive those results. If you talked to most of the other candidates, and most so I know Raila Amolo Odinga was never sent word to the effect that now we have finished the exercise and we are now ready to pronounce the results.
This is not my statute. This was a statute that was signed by Kibaki in consultation with the Prime Minister, as the rule then was. The Prime Minister was Honorable Raila Odinga. It wasn't Uhuru Kenyatta, and it reads as follows. Yeah? The President-elect is the person elected as President under Article 139. Uhuru Kenyatta had just been declared as the President-elect. We are awaiting the swearing in. But the previous day, Raila Odinga had a press conference. Really, we cannot be able to contract out the law on the basis of a press conference.
If they are politicized, they will have politicized themselves. Moi's army kept away even when Uhuru lost. Nobody accused them of interference. We never accused the police of interference in 2002, even when Kevoito was delaying Kebake's certificate.
It was not proper. It could only give an indication that they knew the outcome. They knew the outcome of the verdict, they knew the verdict, or that they were part and parcel of trying to influence the outcome, all right? And so it was improper. I don't know who advised them at that particular time to do such a thing.
You said there were two culprits in this election, the IEBC and
the system.
And the system.
The government system, yeah. Now you can now see.
Yes.
That's precisely what I had in mind.
Now the government system. Uhuru Kenyatta is a person you've worked with in KANU, in a coalition government, and a person you almost joined up with in this coalition that delivered the presidency to him. So he, in fact, is a beneficiary of an election that you say was flawed. Do you think, in your heart of hearts, that he knew or was part of the people that allegedly stole this election?
I wouldn't want to say. Obviously, they would have wanted to be beneficiaries of the whole thing, having been pronounced president and deputy president-elect. All right. Yeah. I leave that to future generations to tell us whether they were part and parcel, or that they were not part and parcel of that system that was responsible for this very heavy malpractice.
President-elect at that time was not sure, other than the surrounding of power that had come to his life in terms of cars, the security guards, and the change of his life. He was still not certain. In fact, an hour to the final pronouncement by the judges, I remember we had a phone conversation, and I remember that phone was made by Jomo Gishaga, who is his private secretary. And by the way, Jomo Gishaga played a very key role because he was he was now the patron of Team Uhuru. So, but when Jomo called, he was basically asking, so from your own assessment, what do you think? Do you think you're winning or what? I mean, and the president asked the same questions. So it's very interesting to hear that anyone believes that by these guys visiting, it cleared doubt on whether or not he would be there or not. In fact, if you look at it, at one time, President Kenyatta complained about the security mechanism during the campaign at that time. So, I mean, surely, the integrity
the president wasn't sure
that he had won.
He was sure about winning. He was not sure about the outcome of the case of the Supreme Court. Of course, he was sure he had been pronounced president-elect, and he was already exercising his role as president-elect. He was sure about that. He was not sure about the outcome of the Supreme Court, just like the rest of us were not.
Those who are in the security apparatus must stand away from elections, except the police, who are mandated to give security during that operation. they must never give the appearance that they have anything to do with what goes on in an electoral tallying center or hall. But I must again repeat, I never went to Bomas, and I am not privy to all that happened there. Yeah.
We strongly recommended that this kind of interference by the security agencies should not be possible in future. It exacerbates the problem. The best safeguard for the security of the election is for the people to be able to see every step of the process, not to have security people responsible for it, but an electoral administration that does it transparently and inclusively.
Miezi kadhaa baadaye, Raila Amolo Odinga alipasua mbarika mjini Kisumu na kuzua mjadala miongoni mwa Kenya.
Ukapenda mtiko songe. Kuna mama mwenye sinonge kumakede. Igonda yeka. Nikajima nekikao okongenga mokado. Nekikao githon gimakajwa machununo. Kima noti imrekucha nechala kulungoni military coup. Kazigini nebedo coordinated jatalo mar jolweny. Mae momiyo joamani wacho gite nodhi kaluongo ni Bomas of Kenya. Ajime yoga nya nentikuno. Aneno wali meri ni kanyo. Utuma ujalego ni kanyo. Frankly Bette ni kanyo. Henry Kosgene ni kanyo. Magima waziri mangi bendera. Tidiro kagugi mundo wakanyo. Winjo. Omiyo mama wacho ni joge ok notiyo. Ni joge manomi okol kura. Orengo ofuo kamin mare. Tino no chane kama Kibaki nong'eyo. Winjo. No chane ke twach mar bura man kuja cha. Nyaka gikaw gino githon mondo gitigo kaka okumba. Magigenyrego e bura momako kuja cha. Winjo wachno. Emomiyo kata ka koro ne wadhi e kot kucha. Jokot ka be nokwarne gi wang'. Otunge nokwane gi wang'. Igone ng'we. Wakawo ting'o kiny idonjo ma wachako kodi mokwongo. Winjo. Emomiyo ne oneno ka kot notamo somo judgment margi. Apenjo.
The statement then came that nobody was going to hand over power to Raila Amolo Odinga, including elements in the military saying they will not accept Raila Amolo Odinga as the commander-in-chief. And some people object when we say these things, but we must say them. It's not out of disrespect to the military. I think the military in Kenya is one of the institutions we're very proud about. I think over the years, compared to many other institutions, they have always, kept away from politics and issues of governance which do not involve the military. But if there is something happening untoward, in order to achieve perfection, for us and for any institutions, we must continue to talk about some of these things. And that goes even with the incident at Westgate, that when the military faltered, we should talk about it instead of burying it in the sand.
Africa, we should have a certain mindset that we want to have genuine results as the expression of the will of the people. It's a fundamental thing. Once we are all on this level, we'll work towards it. But we have a situation in which people in authority are slanted towards an angle. And that is where the problem is.
Kihistoria, huu utasalia kama uchaguzi wa kwanza nchini kuwahi kujadiliwa katika mahakama ya juu zaidi na iliyohusisha chama cha CORD, Africog, IEBC, chama cha Jubilee, Dennis Itumbi na mwenzake pamoja na rafiki wa mahakama chini ya mwamvuli wa mkuu wa sheria.
We've got to be criticized and abused, and no judge is going to summon you for contempt. We all Kenyans, so we get to hear what, after the event, what people are saying. You know, the story was that in the Supreme Court, 4 people were accorded, right? And there were 2 Jubilee. We happen to be judges who represent the big 5, you know, not the animals, but the communities. And even Ibrahim, who is a Somali, he grew up in Luya country. So he's pigeonholed as a Luya. And we knew that everything will be looked at from the perspective of ethnicity. And that's why I said up front that we knew that whichever decision we came up with will be attacked. That's the reality of the situation. But we relied on the law, the constitutions, and the evidence. That was it. These other influences and whatnot didn't bother us. And before the petition, the Jubilee people, especially if you follow the Twitter, their mission was to ask me not to sit, right? Because they basically said I was coded and I was a friend of Raila and whatnot. That was their position. After we decided, it's the CORD people now who started calling me a traitor, and the Jubilee people were, that's an example of that division, and we knew it. We knew it was going to be like that. But as a court, the main thing for us was we looked at the evidence, we applied the evidence to the Constitution and the law, and made the decision knowing that it couldn't be appealed against, and adopted democratic processes of dealing with the evidence and dealing with the legal arguments. As I've said, almost 50 lawyers involved.
Kenyans are asking, because there are these allegations of the 6 Supreme Court judges being bribed 100 million each, and their money is, I think, in some offshore accounts somewhere. Were there was there anything like that you guys were bribed 600 million, 100 million each, and the money was brought in by, I don't know, Njoki Ndongo? No, we just want to hear from you.
I remember I responded to that critique myself earlier on, and my position, which was then that if there are people who have evidence that we were bribed or we were compromised, I challenge them to go to the Judicial Service Commission, okay? Because the Judicial Service Commission is the one that removes judges, right? And they present that evidence there. That's the justice and the fairness of the issue. Because if there's money put in offshore accounts, or some judge brought it, somebody has that particular evidence, and that would be my answer. I answered it before, and will be my answer now. The Judicial Service Commission would like that kind of evidence, even if it means removing the 6 of us. It's a very, very, very serious issue. And if it happened, and the people have evidence out there, or even those who claim they bribed the judges, I think it would be very important for this country if this issue was put to a closure completely. Because we've heard a lot of things. You've heard that the military was involved, and I've been myself told that somebody put a gun to my head And I asked them, what about the other 5 heads, you know? Do they have guns put to them and so forth? So there is a lot of gossip around that issue, which doesn't surprise me, because as I said up front, we're very divided people. I'm speaking for myself. I wasn't bribed, and nobody approached me, and if I was approached, I would have been the first person to go to the country with it.
And don't think that that bench was actually our worst nightmare. Because if you look at even the composition of the bench, we had no part in the composition of the bench, unlike the Prime Minister.
Kwa Jaji Mkuu Willy Mutunga, hilo halikuwa kero kwao, kwani lililokuwa likimsumbua ni uamuzi tata usio na umoja.
My fear, to be quite honest, was a decision that was not unanimous. Although I didn't express it, you know, I didn't express it, but we also knew that if we differed, right? And there was a majority of 4 against 2, you know, or was 3 against 3. We had to sit down and conference and argue.
Mahakamani, kesi ilianza kupamba moto. Huku kesi ikiendelea kusikizwa, baadhi ya malalamishi ya CORD yalitupiliwa mbali.
There were certain issues that I don't think people didn't pay attention to. One, which was very, very, very important, was when the technology failed, the parties, you know, came together to basically decide the way forward. And that was in the affidavit of, you know, many of the agents, okay? And they said the technology has failed, but our decision is that we move forward and use the manual. So there was a political consensus on that. So for us now was to look at whether there were any malpractices arising out of the manual. That is what now seized our minds, because we knew that the political parties had agreed that they use manual. And that's how we assess the evidence then to find out whether there were any malpractices.
I think if you rely too much on technology without making sure that your procedures, even without the technology, are transparent and professional and verifiable, it doesn't matter how much technology you have. And the difference in Ghana is that if you read the Supreme Court judgment, many of those judges acknowledged that there were so many problems in verifying even their register and their counting and tallying procedures. And just knowing that those concerns have been legitimated by a Supreme Court, and that now means that this highest judicial authority in the land has acknowledged that there were very important problems that need to be addressed. Just that makes a huge difference, because now, you know, the public, the members of the public who were concerned are able to say, you know, I'm not crazy, I was right. There was something wrong. 7 days to compile evidence from 34,000 forms is very insufficient.
I saw nothing that was irregular in the scrutiny exercise. The only thing that was irregular here, there, well, maybe it was not stamped, or the signature is below the line. And those are normal challenges of any exercise that is carried out by human beings. But largely, the exercise was way above board.
Kimsingi, demokrasia ya uchaguzi hupimwa katika vituo vya kupigia kura kutumia fomu nambari 34 ambayo ni ya muhimu zaidi.
You either choose to believe mass group or to believe IBC. The Constitution and Article 88 gives the IBC the mandate to conduct elections. It is our duty to do that. Mass group or AfriCoc were petitioners in the Supreme Court. So I think when you are listening or getting information from them, you must take it with a pinch of salt and know that these are partisan groups that had an interest in the results of the election. No forms were missing. Every political party had an agent in the polling station, and they were given a copy of the results, Alan. Why would they now come back and say we don't have the results? We as a commission have the forms. Mass group never came to the commission and asked for the information. They didn't go to the website. They decided to create their own narrative. I want to beg to disagree with their conclusion. I don't agree with that. I think they are partisan, and I support their position.
Ndivyo mambo yalivyo. Navuta unyunyu kwa muda, na nitakaporejea nitakupa uhondo kamili. Usibonyeze kidude. Tuliamua kufanya uchunguzi wetu huru kubaini iwapo kulikuwa na dosari katika matokeo ya uchaguzi uliopita. Hizi ni fomu 34 za data ya IEBC tuliofanikiwa kupata. Fomu ambazo ziliwasilishwa katika mahakama kuu wakati wa uchaguzi tetesi. Katika uchunguzi wetu wa kina, tumebaini ya kwamba kuliweza kuwa na hitilafu mbalimbali katika maeneo mbalimbali nchini Kenya. Na iwapo hitilafu hizo zingelifuatiliwa kwa makini, basi Wakenya wangelijua mbivu na mbichi kuhusiana na uchaguzi uliopita.
There were differences between what was recorded on a form and what was transmitted to the system.
That evidence was brought, right? And it was also, it was also controverted, by evidence from the Jubilee people, right? And ultimately, this is the evidence that I'm talking about. A lot of people, I notice, remember the evidence of their favorite candidates, but the court had the opportunity to hear evidence from all sides. So we were in a very good position to basically find out whether there was any manipulation or there was any deliberate favoring of one candidate or the other. And we basically said no.
That is the name of the game. If you don't protect the integrity of the vote at the polling station, the whole election base falls out. It is critically important to protect the integrity of the vote at the polling station. Yeah, because, well, what are we supposed to do? We are supposed to allow people to make a determination as to who should be their leaders. All right? And the vote. This is a contest which is decided by the voters. They are not decided by the electoral commissioners. They are not decided by the politicians. This is a contest that is decided by the votes of the people. So the integrity of the vote must be, protected at all times.
Every vote must be counted, and you must be confident that every vote has been included in your final tally. The ideal democratic process of each woman and man of voting age being on the voter's roll and being able to go and vote freely according to her or his informed decision is the ideal to which electoral administrators work, but it's not attainable in reality.
Ni fomu tulizofaulu kupata, fomu kadhaa ambazo zinaonesha itilafu katika maeneo mbalimbali humu nchini. Katika uchunguzi wetu tulipiga msasa baadhi ya fomu zilizowasilishwa na IEBC kama ushahidi ya uchaguzi mkuu uliopita. Tulichagua eneo bunge la Turkana Kaskazini na Kati, Igembe Kaskazini, Tigania Mashariki, Tigania Magharibi, Aldai, Kapenguria, Embakasi ya Kati, Narok Kusini, Laikipia Magharibi, Mvita, Ruiru na Matayos. Kwa ujumla eneo bunge 14. Katika maeneo hayo 14 tulibaini kupotea au kutokuwepo kwa fomu 76 za aina ya 34. Kuanzia shule ya msingi ya Lowarengak ambayo ni kituo cha kupigia kura Turkana Kaskazini, hesabu ya fomu hiyo ya stream ya Pilli ilikuwa haimo. Eneo lililoathiriwa kabisa ni Laikipia Magharibi, mahala ambapo fomu 30 zilipotea. La ajabu ni kwamba fomu zilizotoweka zilikuwa ndani ya hesabu kuu ya eneo la upigaji kura ya fomu 36. Kati ya fomu 76 za fomu 34, tuligundua pia kulikuwa na jaribio kama 15 hivi ya fomu 34 zilizokuwa zimetoweka na ambazo hazikuwa zikiambatana na ile ya 36 ambayo pia hazikuwepo. Katika kaunti ya Busia, eneo bunge la Matayos, jina la kituo cha kupigia kura nambari 48 huko Matayos ilikuwa ni shule ya chekechea ya St. Mary's. Kando na kutoweka kwa fomu 34, fomu 36 ilikuwa imeandikwa kwa mkono. Fomu hizi zote tulizopata fursa ya kupiga msasa ni za IEBC na zilizowasilishwa mahakamani. Afisa mmoja mkuu wa IEBC katika kitengo cha Secretariat na ambaye hakutaka kutajwa jina alitueleza kuwa fomu 34 zilizokuwa zikipokelewa katika ukumbi wa Bomas zilikuwa zikitoweka baada ya kuhesabiwa.
There were many different kinds of problems with Form 34. These ranged from the numbers on the forms not adding up. So in one case, I remember I saw votes cast 0, rejected votes 170, valid votes 170. Now, how do you make sense of a form like that? You can't. So numbers not adding up. You had changes made to the form without an authorizing signature from the presiding officer. You had forms where votes cast were greater than the number of registered voters for that polling station. So that actually, over 100% turnout is illegal. So how do you resolve those forms? We also saw forms that were missing the names of certain candidates. And probably the most worrying thing is that there were many missing forms altogether. There's no Form 34 for at least 80 polling stations.
What came to Bomas, Alan, was Form 36 from returning officers.
From returning officers.
Okay? We have got 290 constituencies. And when these returning officers were announcing the results in the constituency, first and foremost, in the constituency, they were announcing the results for all the 6 elections. How many elections? They will say who is the member of parliament, who won the MP. They will say who won the county assembly at the constituency level. But also they will say how many votes the senator got in that constituency, how many votes the governor got in that constituency, and how many votes the president got in that constituency. So at the constituency level, they were announcing results for all the 6 races. So political party agents already had copies of the results announced by the returning officer in Soy constituency for the governor, senator, and for the president. What he was coming to do then was to submit the same results which he announced in the constituency to Nairobi, to bring it to us, because I was a returning officer for the election of the president, to collect together 290, add together, and declare the results. We are simply doing tallying. But as part of the verification, we have to check and confirm they look at all the forms. And like I told you, Alan, some of the presiding officers you will see they are very tired. They will make very basic human errors. Arithmetic were not adding up. Sometimes they will make the wrong entries on the votes cast or votes rejected, and we cannot blame them. I mean, you could see these were not deliberate entries, but mistakes made by human error. And so our team task, and which was allowed by the law. The law allowed the commission to correct any error before we announce the results. And so what we are doing is we are checking and telling the returning officer, is this correct? Okay. Is this now correct? Yes. They will sign. It's not true to say that they didn't sign. They all signed the results which were announced in Bomas of Kenya.
The issue that actually they brought up was Form 36 in court. In politics, they said Form 34, but in court, they brought Form 36. Because Form 34, there is no election that can be announced without Form 34. So Form 34s were there, and they were tabled in court. Even you go to the records of the Supreme Court, which you can be able to access because now they're public documents, you will see they are all there, all of them. The only thing was Form 36. But Form 36 is an aggregation of what is contained in Form 34. Therefore, if Form 34 is signed, then Form 36 is just a counting paper. It's like you used to get a graph paper to draw a graph during your mathematics examinations.
Hitilafu hizi zinaashiria pia matatizo yaliyokuwa yakipokelewa katika vituo vya kupiga kura. Vituo vya kupigia kura kote nchini vilivyotangazwa na IEBC vilikuwa 33,400. Lakini kwa mujibu wa ushahidi uliowasilishwa katika mahakama kuu, vituo hivyo vilipungua hadi 31,025 kufikia siku ya mwisho ya upigaji kura. Huenda hii ikawiana na madai ya afisa mkuu wa IEBC James Oswago katika mazungumzo yao na mshirika wa karibu wa chama cha CORD.
Register mana jotika rodo oloko cha.
Mana dik gini register no nyalo digo because ka all book fail. So we were forced to revert to the manual register.
Correct.
And that means the mumio no the poll book no went back to it. And your evidence is that in Udoki Guinea, mumio kwendemoko uyudo 98-99%. Okunyal bet in an African village. Nika jelo kutera beach onde kukura. Jimbo kura alubu frangwen gaburu te. Ngamodi kuwato unge, ngamakara igilielo unge. It cannot be.
So koro kane poll book fail to no revert to the register ma jo Thika Road no also influence truth.
Yeah. We had no alternative. We had no alternative.
To apenji the entire commission benung'eyo mano koso mano koro in gi maybe chairman mong'eyo. Were they nong'eni the register manyun godo was had a huge influence from Thika Road and not the one ma December 18th.
Oh. IEBC ilieleza mahakama kuu ya kwamba walikuwa na zaidi ya rejista moja kando na kufuata sheria. Kwa ujumla, IEBC ilikuwa na rejista 5 kabla ya uchaguzi mkuu. Lisilojulikana ni rejista ipi kati ya hizo 5 ilitumika wakati wa uchaguzi huo.
Thirdly,
yes.
Kan wagelo register. One wagelo register ni butumiwa abirige 33,406. Yani kikinua reduce mobedo about 32,000 something. Kwa timu mano. Mani geno kunwa consult kunwa nyingi ya pay.
Multi internally.
Mama no kone kumiri kama. Kinyagolo register. Kura to.
Kinyagolo register to.
Kinyagolo register, the register will go on and you can go more away of immediately that is going to problem.
Koro ng'isen register manyo ugolo ni oke mane omiji.
Mano tiyo go ke mano wachi nyiso. Emo mino ngo ka kwinde moko. Nemli maunugo opore gi nemli mawanugo.
Ng'isen that one should be wrong. A man koro is not known on public domain.
Public domain of onge.
IBC has one principal and certified register. This register is comprised of the biometrics and the non-biometrics. Biometrics means people who are captured their facial, they are captured their fingerprints, and any other biometrics which were then captured. And then there are those, there is a register which comprises only of 36,000 people whose biometrics could not be captured for any reason or not. For example, if your fingerprints are worn out, so ideally you can't be, the machine cannot capture you. And those people they were 36,000, slightly over 36,000. So that's the principal register, that's the register we certified, and that's the register we gazetted, and that's the register we submitted even to Parliament. And this is a register which was available long before we went to election.
Kwa mujibu wa mwenyekiti wa IEBC Isaac Hassan kupitia ujumbe mfupi ni kwamba vituo vya kupigia kura vilikuwa 31,983. Isaac anasema idadi ya vituo vya kupigia kura viliunganishwa kutokana na shida ya bajeti, huku zingine zikishirikishwa kwa kutoa idadi ndogo ya wapiga kura. Tulimuuliza ni lini walipoamua kutoa maamuzi ya kupunguza vituo vya kupiga kura na iwapo waliwaeleza Wakenya. Pia tuliuliza ni kwa nini idadi ya vituo vya kupiga kura iliyowasilishwa katika mahakama kuu ilipungua na kufikia 31,025.
Everybody had been told that it would be an electronic register compiled through the BVR kits, etc., and that your name and your information would be stored on a server, and that's the principal legal verifiable register. So when the Green Book came up, it was sort of like, where did this come from? Nobody knew about it. And then when more and more details started coming out, then we saw it was a problem. It's not a problem in and of itself. It is a problem because of the way that it was compiled and the fact that the IBC didn't inform the public that it would be around. But if everybody's details were recorded during the registration process, that should have also included, probably especially included, the people whose electronic data couldn't be recorded. So why weren't they in there? So it just seems like it wasn't very it wasn't done consistently and in a way that we can go back and say, okay, according to the rules set out, this is what we can verify and this is what we can't. There's no way to know.
Now, the issue of green books actually came from AFRICOG. From my understanding of the arguments, they said that the green books were completely illegal. We're not supposed to use because we did away with black books. But in court, it was able to be proven that meetings that were chaired by the then Prime Minister actually decided on the green books. But beyond that, the special register, which they claimed did not exist, was then tabled, and that was the tipping point of the case. The entire case by AFRICOG was that we don't have a special register, we faked it using green books, but Winnie Gushu filed a sworn affidavit showing that all political parties received the special register for vetting long before it was published as on the official voting roll, and therefore the judges were easy to decide that it is not true that the special register did not exist, it actually existed and was approved.
We essentially had 2007 again in 2013. We just didn't have the violence. Having
found the system unsatisfactory way back in 2008, it's a retrograde step to go back to it. The real question, however, is why it was found necessary to do so. That's where a good, frank post-mortem examination of why the more modern, more reliable alternatives didn't work.
we give copies of the register to the political parties. So they know. They know how many people are on the register for every polling station. They do. And sometimes they come to the polling station holding a copy of the register. They are there. Or their agents are holding copies of the registers.
Katika jaribio letu la kaunti 8 nchini, tulifanya uchunguzi dhidi ya kura walizopata Raila Odinga na Uhuru Kenyatta. Tulimulika maeneo ya Changamwe, Sigowet Soin, Lafey, mji wa Thika, Alego Usonga, Gatondo Kusini na Kitui. Tulifanya hivyo kwa lengo la kufuata nyayo za IEBC wakati wa zoezi hilo kama walivyofanya. Tulifanya hesabu ya kura alizopata Uhuru Kenyatta na Raila Odinga kwa mujibu wa fomu 34 ya eneo bunge husika. Kwa kufanya hivyo, tungeliweza kupata hesabu ya kura kamili iliyotangazwa na IEBC ndani ya fomu 36. Tulifanya pia hesabu ya wapiga kura kama ilivyoandikwa ndani ya fomu 34 na kulinganisha na ile ya IEBC ya fomu 36. Hapa tuliona mambo ya kushangaza. Katika uchunguzi wetu, fomu 34 za mji wa Thika zilionyesha kuwa Uhuru Kenyatta alipata kura 54,331. Naye Raila Odinga akipata kura 11,207. Katika fomu 36 iliyotangazwa eneo bunge hili kama hesabu ya mwisho ya kura, Uhuru Kenyatta alikuwa na kura 71,358, kura 17,027 zaidi, tofauti na alivyopata katika fomu 34. Raila Odinga naye alikuwa na kura 5,182 zaidi ya ile aliyopata ya kura 16,389. Idadi ya wapiga kura mjini Thika pia iliongezeka kutoka 78,103 hadi kura 103,467. Tabia hii haikuwa katika ngome ya Uhuru Kenyatta pekee, zilikuwa kila mahala. Katika kaunti ya Siaya huko Alego Usonga, katika uchunguzi wetu wa form 34, Raila Odinga alikuwa amepata kura 29,764, naye Uhuru Kenyatta kura 42. Lakini ndani ya fomu 36 ya matokeo yaliyotangazwa Bomas, kura ya Raila Odinga ilikwea hadi kura 66,380 na kuongezeka na kura 36,616, huku ya Uhuru Kenyatta ikiongezeka na 150 hadi kura 192. Idadi ya waliojisajili kupiga kura iliongezeka kutoka 31,925 hadi 72,112. Huko Changamwe, kura ya Raila Odinga ilipungua kutoka 27,696 hadi 27,552, huku ya Uhuru Kenyatta ikisalia sawa. Katika maeneo ya Sigowet Soin, kura ya Uhuru Kenyatta ilipungua kutoka 32,609 hadi 32,559, huku vilevile ya Raila Odinga ikipungua kutoka 1,452 hadi 1,443. Kando na hayo, tuliona fomu kama 9 hivi katika maeneo ya shule ya msingi ya Kadhageri, eneo bunge la Runyenjes na kaunti ya Embu, ambapo fomu 34 hazikuwa na sahihi ya maajenti husika.
In Ghana, when the number of the result is more than the number of registered voters, we automatically cancel the result.
You know, they affected both candidates. When we ran the ERT data against the polling station data, we found the most inconsistencies for President Kenyatta and for Raila Odinga. And they were both impacted quite severely, missing votes. So it's hard to say, that one was affected more than the other.
We decided, despite that there was a huge contest between the presidential candidates in terms of was the election fair or not, we decided we wanted to do a different case within that opportunity that would assure Kenyans in future, whoever who is running or whoever who wins consequently, so that when we are going, it is very clear, because the constitutional language from the lawyers of different sides, as you heard, was different. So we wanted a Supreme Court pronouncement on the issue, so that in the next election we are very clear, if a vote is spoiled, it cannot be counted. And our arguments were clear. If I put a presidential ballot paper into the women reps ballot box, does that presidential ballot paper then count as a spoiled vote? And what is the impact overall if that happened in each of the polling stations more than 10 times? To then mean a large chunk of the voters and votes would have been lost.
Huenda swala la siku 14 likawa kikwazo kikuu kwa majaji husika, kwani kimsingi ilikuwa vigumu kwao kukamilisha shughuli kama hiyo ya kihistoria kwa muda mfupi. Huenda pia waliokuwa wakipinga matokeo hayo walisahau kuchagua kesi yenye uzito kutoa ushindi, na badala yake wakawasilisha mrundiko wa kesi pasi na kuzingatia uchunguzi maksusi.
The Supreme Court did what they could within the 14 days. But from my view as an onlooker, I don't think the case was presented to be won, because the case did not go for 1 or 2 points. It was an omnibus complaint. Complaints about the entire system, the registration of voters, which included complaints of the BVR, complaints about the entire system, and then complaints about the about the conduct of the presidential election. I think in any case where you are given time limit, like 14 days, you've got to choose. Even if you have 1,000 grievances, you've got to choose 1, 2, 3 of the ones you can present with clarity and quickly for the judge's consideration in 2 weeks. Once you give omnibus, you set the stage for losing.
I think we were more concerned about the bigger issues rather than the nitty-gritty of government. And I think the nitty-gritty of government is just as important as the great objectives.
To determine the outcome of a disputed election, it should not do so according to the ordinary common law adversary rules. It should be a mixed method. It should be both inquisitorial and adversarial. It should have its own investigatory capacity and power. And if necessary, should be able to call in other parties into the dispute, not merely rely on the formal rules of court for the admission of further parties to what is essentially a private dispute. This isn't a private dispute, this is a public dispute about public interest.
If you look at the ELOG report, the marks that were given for each of those candidates, as I mentioned, Uhuru Kenyatta had 49.7 plus or minus 2.7. So if you do 49.7 plus 2.7 gets you to what, 51? Gone through the threshold, right? If you do minus, exactly. So, I mean, if you look at the ELOG, if you genuinely look at the ELOG report and make deductions, it could have swung in either way because there was a margin of error.
What would be in doubt is about, did any one of them make the 50+1 mark? If the case was about that, then in 14 days, in 3 days actually or 2, a retally of the presidential vote is possible. But if you are doubting everything, what is possible within 14 days?
Muda ulikuwa ukiyoyoma na kwa mara ya kwanza Willy Mutunga anashikilia msimamo wake wa kutoa uamuzi. Uamuzi anaosema uliwaweka wa Kenya kwa pamoja.
If after 14 days you hadn't decided on the petition, Kibaki will still be in State House, right? You don't know who the president is. You haven't ruled on whether there's going to be a rerun. There would have been war and bloodshed. There's no doubt about it. Political vacuums in issues of political succession, Mohammed, right, are very, 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 very dangerous. And I think we all also felt very clearly that the Constitution says we do that. And we worked on the basis that, you know, we've got to finish. Because the political consequences, the social consequences, elections are so emotive. We had the experience of 2007 in our minds, and it's not more about law; it's also about politics, and you have to be, sensitive to that.
Hatimaye Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta alitangazwa rasmi kama mshindi.
The third and fourth respondents were validly elected and declared as President-elect and Deputy President-elect of the Republic of Kenya respectively by the second respondent in the presidential elections held on 4th March 2013. It is the decision of the court that the third and fourth respondents were validly elected. As to whether the rejected votes ought to have been included in determining the final tally of votes in favor of each of the presidential candidates by the second respondent, it is the decision of the court that such rejected votes ought not to have been included in calculating the final tallies in favor of each presidential candidate. As to what consequential declarations, orders, and reliefs that this honorable court ought to grant based on the above determinations, the following are orders of the court. Petition number 5 of the consolidated petitions is hereby dismissed. Petition number 4 of the consolidated petitions is hereby dismissed. As to petition number 3 of the consolidated petitions, the prayer by the petitioners seeking a declaration of recomputation of percentages by the second respondent is declined, as the court has no jurisdiction. Regarding orders as to costs, the court orders that each party bears its own costs. The detailed judgment containing reasons for decision of the court will be issued within 2 weeks from today. Orders accordingly.
Yes, Mohammed. Yeah.
Two last question.
Mm-hmm.
Last question is: do you regret the decision?
I don't regret that decision. I think people, judges, and the judge, people come to regret their decisions if they have a vested interest in an outcome, and they don't get that outcome. And that's a reality, because once you are hearing a case between two parties, right, and you are being bribed, right, you obviously want to decide for one, right? You get to regret that decision because you you haven't looked at the law and the evidence because you wanted a particular outcome, so you regret it. But if you have, as the Americans say, no dog in a fight, and you're just looking at the law and the evidence and justice, you don't regret it. That is not to say that you didn't make mistakes. And the people can start saying that there were mistakes here, and that's what the law schools are doing, and everybody else is doing.
It was not fair at all. It was not fair at all, especially in this new constitutional order and dispensation. One of the things which I would have expected the Chief Justice, knowing that he came from a reform background, from a very activist background, and he never regressed even being called an activist, was that he now threw out of the window substantial justice because of a technical issue which had been sufficiently addressed. But because that technical issue gave the court a window to throw away that massive evidence, he was persuaded by his colleagues, to go that way. Because normally, and I'm very happy that in most of the decisions of the Supreme Court, he tends to write his own judgment, whether agreeing or disagreeing. But in this particular one, he didn't write either a concurring or a dissenting judgment.
Uhuru Kenyatta was elected president fair, square, outright, and he is a president by the choice of a majority of Kenyans.
800 pages of evidence being expunged on a technicality. And then at the same time, the same court comes back and says that there was no evidence and throws out the case. So that is what actually gave us the feeling that there's something more than meets the eye in this particular case.
We knew as judges, and I knew very clearly from the time the petition was filed, that in this country which is so divided on ethnic, religious, and other factors, right? You are not going to come up with a decision that will find favor with everybody. That was very clear to us. But as lawyers, you look at the Constitution, you look at the law, and you look at the evidence. And that's what you deal with. It might be limiting, but that's not your problem, okay? And that's what we did. To make sure that no particular judge had interest in the final outcome, what I did, which I'm disclosing for the first time, is that I gave each judge a portion of the issue, the 6 of us. So you had your issue, deal with it with your team, with your lawyers and legal researchers, deal with it. I personally did with the issue of technology. That's the one I dealt with. That's the one I gave myself with the team. So there was no way I was going to know, the verdict of the 5 colleagues. Not at all, because I wasn't involved in either the burden of proof or the other issues that were raised, right? And after we did all that work, when we conferenced at the end, and the conference is where the Chief Justice, asks every judge, in this particular issue, how do you find? And then they say, given the Constitution, the law, and the evidence, this is the verdict, right? It took less than 30 minutes to have a unanimous decision. Although people don't want to believe it, that's their own thing.
In an election, you're not dealing with an individual interest. Never mind that Mr. X says, I should have been declared the elected member of parliament for Kirinyaga. It's who is the winner according to the will of the voters of Kirinyaga constituency. It's a democratic process. It's not a personal interest process. Who is the legitimate president of the Republic of Kenya affects each and every Kenyan in the country, not merely the candidates who were in the top 2 or 3 in the final poll. A petition is merely a pale reflection of trying to use the old common law adversary system of dispute resolution in a public law sphere where you are concerned with the interests of millions of people. Ordinarily, in your country, as in my country, you would leave it to the petitioner to prove his case.
I think the writing is on the wall. If we don't do something about the office of the Registrar of Political Parties and the entire Electoral Commission, I would say 2017, there may be no need for elections. We can just let the executive sit in their offices and give us a list of the people they would want to come in.
The award I got from London, ICPS, the same civil society, Africa, were actually raising objection. They said I should not be, I don't deserve an award. My own countrymen, while Afarijan of Ghana got the same award as me, but for me, I have got Kenyans who are saying no, don't give him.
I actually was amazed to hear that our Electoral Commission had received an award, and I thought that was a joke of the year, you see? And until they themselves admit that there are shortcomings which need to be worked on, because they too, like us, are Kenyans. They need a credible, free and fair elections. We need stability as a nation. Until they admit that there are things that need to be done, then we are not on the way to having free and fair elections in the country.
Kilichobakia sasa ni kujifunza ni wapi tulipokwenda kombo kwa lengo la kujitayarisha katika uchaguzi wa mwaka wa 2017. Wanasema wajuzi wa mambo, unapoumwa na nyoka ukiona ugongo, sharti utashtuka. Lakini pia ukupigapo ndio ukufunzao. Wadadisi wa aina mbalimbali wanasema kwamba Kenya bado ina nafasi ya kujifunza mengi kutoka kwa chaguzi mbili zilizopita. Kwa mfano, masuala ya kuamini mashine zaidi, kutoa zabuni ya vifaa vya uchaguzi, mafunzo ya mapema kwa wahudumu wa IEBC, sheria kali dhidi ya wadukuzi wa tarakilishi kutoka pande zote mbili husika, kuandikisha wapiga kura kabla ya mwaka 2017, na kile kipengele cha rais aliye mamlakani na watumishi wa umma kutojihusisha na kinyang'anyiro cha wanaowania viti vya urais. Ni dhahiri kuwa iwapo tutazingatia haya kama taifa, basi Kenya itatoa demokrasia bora zaidi na ya kuigwa barani Afrika.
Kenyans must reform the Electoral Commission. I've said that Kenyans cannot go to the ballot with this Electoral Commission in place the way it is. It will be a tragedy for that to happen. Look at what is happening now in the petitions.
You know, unlike in Ghana, the law and the regulations in Kenya, in as far as the election process, allowed the commission, the election management body, to resort to the manual register for purposes of voter identification. Did that have challenges? Yes. Did that help to build the confidence of Kenyans in the elections? Perhaps not. It did not. And certainly those are issues that need to be looked at moving forward in terms of how is technology deployed by an election management body. One, when you look at issues of their own preparedness, you know, how early are these kits, do the kits come in, be it the BVR, EVIDs, or even the results transmission system.
Electoral Commission should not so much be bothered to seek apologies from those who doubt them. Let them be worried about how to restore their credibility in the eyes of Kenyans.
Candidates are candidates, and they must all be treated equally. See, at the time that the president is coming through a nomination period, it's a candidate, it's not president.
Uamuzi umefikia kikomo.
You're chasing the wrong shadow, yeah. Yeah, just it's a waste of time. The thing is over, it's done with. Do something else. Yeah.
Mohamed Ali, makala ya Jicho Pevu, KTN.